It is full throttle down at the state legislature, finding an extra gear for the number of big ticket items being talked about down at the State House. So let's not waste any time. Try to keep up. Let's get right over to Joe Paris.
Yes.
Joe, sounds like some big conversations going on today, especially when it comes to voting.
Yes, lawmakers in the House State Affairs Committee discussed this morning making a change to how absentee voting works in the state of Idaho. There's been concerns from some in recent years that voting absentee or by mail, it's a security risk that comes with the chance for fraud. So legislation that's out there right now would narrow down specifically who can get an absentee ballot. The proposed law would only allow a few situations to get an absentee ballot, and that includes if you're on active duty in the military, if you have an illness, disability, or you're hospitalized, people that need to work or attend a university, or a person that's out of the country on a religious mission. They also did carve out a part for winter birds, that's Idahoans that move away from the gem state to find a warmer area. So here's what the bill sponsors have to say about this idea to narrow down absentees.
Well, what it comes down to, folks, let's be honest about this. It's convenience. People are using absentee ballots for convenience. That's what I'm hearing. So we have to ask ourselves, how important is it that we vote? How important is it that we preserve this republic? Those that are protesting against this are saying it's too inconvenient for them to come out and vote for some reason or other. They have to drive a great distance or something along those lines. Well, I would suggest that they buy groceries. And I would suggest that they do other kinds of shopping, and then they go out when necessary.
And if we don't get hold of this now, the push is to make Idaho a completely mail-in state. And that's what they've done in Washington and Oregon. And I think the consequences of that would be horrible for Idaho. Civic duty, that's what voting is. It's our ability to get up in the morning or plan our day around voting. And I think what it's become is a convenience. And more of a convenience. And I believe in convenience, but also this is voting.
So there was extended public testimony in committee. Many people testified against this idea that you just heard, and those people include Secretary of State Phil McGrain. McGrain detailed his opposition to the committee.
I don't believe that the security of our elections and the accessibility of our elections need to conflict with one another. We can have accessibility and security simultaneously. And I believe we do have that here in the state of Idaho, including with access to absentee voting. It's an important tool for voters to be able to get to the polls and vote. There are numerous situations, not just the situations outlined in this legislation, for reasons why someone may need to vote absentee. A perfect example that we see frequently is legislative service. Many of you live in other parts of the state, and we have an election coming up and may choose to vote by absentee just so you can participate in a local school bond or levy election. And I think that's important. The geography of our state contributes to the use of absentee ballots. As the chairman knows, because he's worked with us, there are some precincts that only vote by absentee because they're so rural and so distant in terms of geography that there's no way to put a reasonable polling location in place.
So that bill did pass committee. It now heads to the full House, and it would be a major change if this does become law, so we're going to track that for you. And happening as we speak right now, you may be tuning into the 208 just for this. Lawmakers in the Senate Education Committee, they took up a very heated topic: the use of school bathrooms, locker rooms, and overnight accommodations in the lens of transgender or non-binary students. Now, this is a topic being talked about at length in the Caldwell School District. Where do transgender kids go to the bathroom? So, Senate Bill 1100 looks to, quote, ensure that those facilities and accommodations are separated for, quote, biological boys and girls. And the bill looks to ensure that, quote, the school would need to provide reasonable accommodations for any student who is unwilling or unable to use a multi-occupancy facility designated for his or her sex. The legislation continues to say, quote, a public school shall provide a reasonable accommodation to a student who, for any reason, is unwilling or unable to use a multi-occupancy restroom or changing facility designated for that person's sex and located within a public school building or multiple occupancy sleeping quarters while attending a public school-sponsored activity. It also says that it provides a written request. You would have to have a written request for reasonable accommodation to the public school, according to the legislation. Now, the bill sponsor, Senator Ben Adams says he knows that many schools are already following this policy, but this puts it in code and settles any confusion about what to do. Again, the committee is meeting as we speak right now, but they did hear some extended public testimony that just ended a short time ago. Here's a taste of that and some of the comments from people on both sides of the aisle. First, someone for, second, you'll hear someone against.
Some men and boys will abuse bathrooms and locker rooms that are open to gender identity rather than biology by falsely proclaiming womanhood in order to gain access to women and children for motives of malice. Such facilities could become easy access and breeding grounds for predators. Thus, it would be common sense to keep these facilities separated based on biology rather than identity to protect women and children. Here are 5 stories of real-life transgender men that abuse women and children.
This bill is not only unconstitutional, but it also perpetuates harmful stereotypes and contributes to the stigmatization of marginalization of transgender individuals. Banning transgender youth from the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity not only denies them the right to use facilities that align with their gender, but it also places them at an increased risk of harassment and violence. This bill incorrectly states that trans kids using their preferred restroom leads to cis students experiencing harassment, embarrassment, and other terrible acts like rape. Not only does this perpetuate the trans community as pedophiles, abusers, and totally false characteristics, but legislation, precedent, and rhetoric that is in this bill and other hundreds of bills introduced across this U.S. isolates the trans community.
In the event that this proposal is violated by a school, there is course for civil action against the school. But Brian, again, as we were just saying, the committee actually wrapped up during that report. So I was on air here with you. I wasn't able to go ahead and check out exactly if it passed. So our Andrew Bartline is in the committee room right now. And coming up at the end of the show too, Brian, we can have an update for you. Though, again, I was watching on my phone during the report. The committee ended during the show. So I was going to tell you this. I imagine that it did pass and go to the full Senate. That's a good guess based on the questions and the testimony were heard from the committee. We know that the Democrats on the Senate Education Committee were kind of speaking out against it, kind of asking questions of the sponsors, why is this necessary?
Testimony was predominantly for this bill. But I'm going to go back to this voting one really quickly. This idea of convenience, when is that a bad thing? It's why polling places are near your house. And since when do we have to crawl to school uphill both ways, or it's not worth it? I don't get that argument at all.
We'll find out on the House floor. And again, I'll text you, and you can give everyone an update in a minute on the other stuff.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep.